this is an hour-long Yin Yoga class, and just to be clear about what we're going to do with Yin, we're going to get into poses, we're going to stay for a while, and the edge that we're looking for with the Yin pose is that there is something that's interesting. It could be a sensation of stretch, it could be a sensation of sort of pressure, or a little bit of intensity. The way that you would describe some of these poses and some of the sensations is going to be unique individual to individual. So what we're interested in finding is like there's a little something interesting happening here, and then we just pay attention to it. And if it starts to get softer, we can certainly add more intensity back in by increasing the positioning in the pose. If it's too much though, the nervous system will try to fight, and you'll actually tense up around the pose. And if that's happening, then we lose the real benefit of the practice. So physically, the benefit to putting some stress on these deeper connective tissue areas of the hips and the low back and the legs and even the knees and the ankles to a degree, when we put a little bit of stress on these structures, we bring awareness to those structures. There is an increase in fluid because it stimulates the production of hyaluronic acid in that tissue, which then hydrates that tissue. And that's more what we're looking for, is we're looking for a kind of healing stimulation to these areas. The joints all in particular, but also all of the connective tissue that hold those joints together, down to the fascial layer that lives under the skin and in between muscles that touch, like the thighs, hamstrings, quads, these outer hip muscles, that kind of thing. So we're bringing as much as we can stress to those areas so that there's a sense when we're done of being a little freer moving, a little more viscous, a little kinder feeling, that the joints and the tissue itself, the muscle areas, move more smoothly and give us a smoother gait and a smoother sense of ourselves, of being in the body. That's what we're after. But if we push too hard, then we go into injury, and we want to avoid that, because that then is counter to what we're trying to do. It tightens us and makes scar tissue happen and that sort of jazz, which will inhibit movement. Okay, so how to find that edge? Well, find a sensation and then notice if you can relax. Can you relax your mouth, your face, your shoulders? Can you breathe deeply and stay focused on your breath? If those are true, and you still feel kind of something that's interesting and spicy, then that's the right edge to be on. If you can't keep a deep rhythmic breath, if there's sharp, shooting, numb, burning, tingly, heat sensations, particularly around the joints, back off of those poses. And even if you just feel tension building in your body, back off of the poses. Now, to back off of poses, it's really helpful to have some prompts. So you can have some little throw pillows if you've got those around your house. You can certainly have some yoga blocks. I like yoga blocks. I have a lot of different ones. I have ones that are shaped in rounder ways and ones that are square and some that have sloping edges. But any yoga blocks will do. And then if you've got blankets, blankets are super helpful. And in fact, if I were going to invest in some yoga props and I were starting out and have never invested in yoga props before, this is what I would buy. I would get 2 yoga blocks of whatever sort you think you like the best. So these are 4-inch ones. I like these because they're very versatile. They're very sturdy if I want to use them to help me balance and that sort of thing. But they're also, I can sit on them or I can lean onto them and that sort of jazz. So I am a fan of yoga blocks and I like the 4-inch ones, but some people prefer a more narrow block. So if you like the 2-inch ones, get 2 2-inch blocks instead of 4-inch blocks. I would get a yoga strap, and it can be one like this that's just one long belt, or you can get ones that have built-in loops, or even ones that are shaped like a figure 8. They're all great. They have different ways that you can use them depending on which one you get, but get the one you think is best for you, and then get a blanket that's not too heavy to carry. So this is a wool blanket that's a pretty nice size. It's not too big. It would probably cover the top of a full-size bed or a queen-size bed. Those Mexican striped blankets are really nice. They have the fringes and they kind of have different stripe patterns. Those are lightweight. You can generally wash them in your washing machine and put them in the dryer on low. And so they're easy to care for. Wool blankets have to be dry cleaned, so you want to be mindful of that. So you want to get those things, a blanket, a couple of blocks, and a strap. And if you've got those props, you can make everything work. Now at home, you can use whatever pillows you've got, couch cushions, throw pillows, whatever you got. But for purposes of going out into the world to do yoga again, you're not going to be sharing props for at least the next year. Invest in these three things: yoga blocks, a strap, and a blanket, and maybe something to carry them in. If you've got like one of those grocery bags that are reusable, those work great. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my blanket and just roll it up a little bit. That's going to go under my legs. And then I'm going to use my yoga blocks today to create quite a lift. Now, if you don't have yoga blocks, use a throw pillow. And the way you're going to organize the pillow is so that it goes diagonally down your back. So your head goes towards one corner and your tailbone towards the other corner, and that goes under your back. And that'll give you a nice lift. It's a little softer than what I'm going to do with these blocks, but it's nice. Okay, so I've got one block that I'm going to put at the 4-inch edge like that. This is where my shoulder blades are going to rest. And when my shoulder blades are on this block, the bottom edge of this block is going to be between 1/2 inch and 1 inch below the bottom tip of my shoulder blade. So they're going to be up on the block. This block is to go under my head. Okay? So I'm going to throw my legs over the blanket so that I'm in position. Then I'm going to lie down on this block. And this takes me a second to get it in the right spot. Now here's the thing. This is not a lazy boy recliner. I'm not going to get on these blocks and be like, oh, this is so comfortable, I think I'll stay all day. But it should not feel super uncomfortable either. If it feels really uncomfortable, the block is not in the right place. If the block is too low, it's going to feel very uncomfortable because these big bones of our shoulder blade help support us on the block. But if I'm down on my spinal vertebrae instead, it's not very comfortable. So you want the block right under the shoulder blades. And then my shoulder blade, if I kind of lift them and bring them in, make a nice little shelf right on this block. I'm just going to get just a notch higher. And then I'm going to bring my blanket in just a little bit more because I moved. Okay. Now this one, I'm going to find a spot on the back of my skull that feels like it's a good spot to rest. This is a little more extreme than what I do sometimes with the blanket, but I like it. I like all of the options. Now, I'm going to put my feet together, pull this blanket right up into the hips, and then drop my knees open. So now the blanket is supporting my thighs. If I want more sensation here, I can push the blanket down a little bit. If I want more support, I pull the blanket up higher towards the top of my hip. Once I get myself on the blocks here, and it feels, again, if I rock a little bit, the bottom tip of my shoulder blade is all the way on this block. It's not hanging off the edge. And then I just find that spot where my head feels good. Now, I like my head a little bit on the higher side. Some people will like their head level. When I do that, my chin sticks up, so it's not actually level, it's dropping backwards. So for me, it's better for that block to be a little higher. And you'll have to experiment for yourself. Now, when I drop my arms over the side, I try to find the spot where my elbows touch the floor. If your elbows don't touch the floor, you can put something underneath your elbows or use something a little smaller under your back, like a pillow or a blanket. Oh, and then we're just going to rest here for a few moments. A lift under my back. What happens here for me is twofold. One is that the arm bone itself drops backwards into the shoulder socket. And so it takes away the pressure from my pectoralis minor and my anterior deltoid that often try to hold my shoulder forward because that's where I often put my arms, right? if I'm using my computer, or I'm holding onto my phone, or I'm doing stuff in the kitchen or sewing, whatever it is that you do with your arms. Maybe you're a hairdresser, your arms are up here, or a dentist, something like that, then your arms are in front of you a lot of the day too. What happens is the muscles on the front of the shoulder, and really the back of the shoulder, they let go, and the front of the shoulder, they tighten up to hold and stabilize the arm bone in the socket in the way that you're holding your arm. So what I'm trying to do is release that tendency by letting the arm bone really hang and drop back. So sometimes for me, as I hold this, and we've been here about a little over half our time now, so as I kind of hold this pose, I might drift my arms a little farther out to create the change, kind of, or a little bit more of a constant opportunity to change. Because after a while, it stops moving, right? And the arm bone is then settled into wherever it is resting. So if I want to keep that stretch going, I can extend my arms out a little bit, get a little wider, and then I'm going to feel again that kind of spicy sensation of things happening. And one arm might be more interested in doing that than the other, so it's okay if your two arms are doing something slightly different. If you've got sensation, you're there. And then just breathe deep. So we're going to stay for another minute and 15 seconds, just over another minute. We're going to take a nice big breath. We're going to let go with a really big ah. Now, first thing I'm going to do is just bring my knees together. And then, I'm going to take this block out from underneath my head. And once I've got that guy out from under there, it takes a second sometimes to untangle it. I'm going to roll to my side and then slip this block out from under my upper back. Like so. And then I'm coming back onto my back. Now, I'm going to go ahead and slide my blanket out from under me because I'll use that again in a second. But right now I just want to be kind of free of any of the props. And I am a fan of this sensation of coming off the block. There's this really lovely sense of just ease that happens in my upper back when I take the block out from under it. It feels like my back goes wider than it was before. And it's an interesting sensation. It's much more intense than when I just use a blanket underneath my shoulder, which is very subtle and sweet. This is a big sensation, and as such, sometimes it even feels nice to kind of massage the muscles that were up on that block because it's such a big sensation. So I'm just kind of rocking that upper back into, using the floor for pressure, give myself a little self-massage. Okay, so we're going to do a twist, but before we do the twist, just stretch out your legs and pause to kind of take an inventory of how your body feels right now. Feel the two hips in relationship to each other, the two legs in relationship, the sides of your waist, and just see if you feel anything like, is there an asymmetry? Does everything feel pretty balanced? So you'll have a little bit of data to work with. So for me, there's always a little bit of asymmetry. I'm always tighter on my right side. So it feels like my right hip is flexed a little bit more, my right leg isn't quite as long, the side of my waist is a little bit kind of pulled forward. And this is just a product of the hip flexors and my outer hip on this side are much stronger, much more powerful, and as such, exert more force than on my left side. The way that I refer to my two sides is that this side is my moray eel side, it's powerful, strong sea creature on this side. is in my octopus side, which is a sea creature that can kind of morph itself into all kinds of shapes. And it's still strong, but much more, like, it just has a little bit more mobility, whereas this side is very strong, very powerful, but a little less mobility. So that's how I refer to them, instead of calling my body like, oh, this is my bad hip, because that feels like I'm creating judgments around things that aren't really true and that are subjective. Instead, coming kind of into a relationship of thinking about them in terms of an animal quality or just the difference in the two, rather than calling one good and one bad. Just thought out there, yogis, for your own thought purposes. So I've got my knees bent, and I'm going to take my legs over to one side. Now, I am going to use a yoga block potentially, or maybe just this blanket. So once I get over to the side, I'm going to know. So I'm going to bring my knees over to one side, and when I get here, I want to see, like, can I drop my leg over the top of the stack? And I can, but what would be more comfortable is if I were to put blanket, or I could use a block too. I'll just test out the blanket first. Yeah, that's nice. Just having something under the thigh gives me a little softer surface there, and then this leg has a little bit more room to kind of drop over. You can also hook your foot behind your calf if you want. Now I'm going to settle my upper back a little bit more on the floor, and I'm continuing this kind of opening around my chest by extending my arm out. And again, I want to find a spiciness that feels like, oh, that's interesting, right? I've got a little outer hip stretch. I've got to stretch through this whole big pectoralis muscle, but it's not so intense that I can't relax and breathe and pause. And so we're going to stay for a bit. And this won't be quite as long as the last pose that we did, but we're going to stay for about 3 minutes. So if it feels like you could use more support under your legs, put more support under there. Use a block, use a pillow. I've turned my head in the same direction as my knees because I find that the most pleasant. But you could turn your head the other way if you want to create a little more sensation around your neck. Things get too spicy, things go numb or something like that, you should definitely adjust the arm position, right? Try a little deeper, try a little closer to the body, see if that creates a little better sensation for you. Sometimes things start out feeling really good and then they wind up not feeling so good. So we've got 1 minute left here. Always adjust your body as things shift. So we're going to take 2 more breaths. Now bringing this leg back with me first, so coming back that way and then letting this guy follow. And then once we're out of a twist, I'm not going anywhere right away. I'm I'm going to do just little windshield wipers. You can pull your knees into your chest. I like that one too. And then as you're ready, we're going to go back to just pausing on the ground. And then just see if a change occurred. Now, my left leg feels even longer than it did before, and my left arm feels a little longer. And so, just everything feels like it's kind of been tractioned out. So I'm going to take 2 more breaths just laying stable before I do the other side, but I'm definitely doing the other side. Hopefully you're with me. It takes a little bit of time for my spine to kind of redistribute the fluids, and my back feels like it's ready to do a twist the other way. All right, so we're going to bring the legs over the opposite direction, and again, you might decide you need a little bit more support. You want a blanket or something like that underneath your thigh or under your hip. I definitely need a little more support on this side than I did on the other side. So there we go. Let's try it. And then, again, I'm going to kind of adjust my arm bone. And we'll see where we land here, yogis. Oh, and then do let yourself find a way to relax. Oh. See if you can let your body kind of sink into the shape. Take nice deep breaths. We're not in a hurry. This is one of the nice things about Yin Yoga. So we're always just wherever we are. Make sure you come back to a kind of deep, smooth breath. If you lose track of the breath, it's a good place to kind of just get yourself back on track. We're a little over the halfway mark here. If your mind starts to wander off to little projects or thoughts about work and stuff, just bring yourself back to your breath and the pose. And this feeling of kind of letting go into the shape. We got about another minute here. All right, yogis, we've got 2 big breaths. Nice big inhale. And then we're going to gently return this whole thing to the center. Take a moment. And stretch out. And for me, there's such a dramatic change, because now the right side feels like it matches the left side, and it didn't even feel that way to begin with. And so there's been a definite releasing of tissue all on my right side. And the right side was a little spicier than the left side, it always is. But it's really lovely to feel that sort of sense of balance, even if it doesn't last for very long. It's still nice to kind of feel it now. Just a kind of sense of symmetry, however temporary. All right, yogis, we are going to come to a seated position, but if you would like to do some little cat-cow shapes or something along that line, kneeling, you could do those first, and then we could meet up in the seated position. Oh. All right, yogis. So we're going to take a seated position that is called the half butterfly. So we just did a full butterfly before we did the twist. Now we're going to do a half butterfly. Now the half butterfly is distinguished by the long leg being more towards the center. Half dragonfly, leg goes out to the side. Half butterfly, leg is down the middle. Now if you'd prefer to do it the other way, I'm not going to stop you. I'm not at your house. But the half butterfly is a nice way to get into the hamstring, which the muscles on the back of the thigh. So I'm choosing it for that reason today. Now, I find it helpful to have a little blanket as a prop. So the way that I use it is I put it underneath the knee so that my straight leg has a little bit of support for the back of my knee. I tend to hyperextend my knee, and that causes me trouble. And then my bent leg, I can pull this closer to my thigh or further out under the knee to create a little support so this knee feels like it's in a good position. Again, you don't have to use props with Yin Yoga. The reason to use the props is to create enough ease that you put the spicy sensation where you want it, in the hamstrings, the glutes, the back, and not in your knee joint where you might not want it. Right on? So use the props appropriately for you. So we're going to fold forward, and once I get into this forward bend a little bit, I'm kind of rocking to get my sit bones out from under me and to get as much forward momentum with my pelvis as possible. I'm also going to use my yoga blocks just to kind of create some little arm rests for myself. Oh, try to figure out where to put them. Here we go. This just gives me a place to rest my arms as I fold over my leg. Now, there's a tendency, because I'm used to practicing in a more active way, for me to enliven my foot. Toes point up, I got my thigh all excited, but with Yin, we want to try to let that relax a bit. It's not that you can't do it, it's just more Yin not to. So if you want to keep that leg more enlivened, your pose has a little more Yang, but if you are willing to try it, let everything get really soft. It's an interesting way to practice. And I'm letting my back go round, not forcing myself forward, but just allowing the back to round, because it stretches and releases the muscles that live on the outside of my spine. Again, I'm doing this in a very gentle, very mindful way. If there were sensations that feel like you're being too pushy, back off. sure you're taking nice deep breaths, yogis. We're going to stay for one more minute. Right, yogis, we're going to take a nice deep breath. Let go with a big ah. And then we're going to inhale our way up. And this is going to turn into a swan. Now, I'm going to wind up turning sideways so that I can stretch out in this longer space I have here. And I'm going to take my blanket and actually a little throw pillow and use them for my pose too. The theory is that this leg that's up here is going to wind up stretching back behind you. And again, I'm just going to have to turn 90 degrees to pull that off. Okay. Now you can do this without the props. Like your leg can be bent. It can be all the way straight. You can lean a little to the outside. You can lean a little to the inside. For me, I like it best if I have a little bit of a soft surface underneath my hip. Kind of pushes me more towards the center, and then I get a little more onto the top of this thigh. I also like to be a little higher up, so I'll put blocks underneath me, and that usually gives me the best sensation without putting my leg to sleep because I'm leaning too heavily onto this inner thigh. So you're going to kind of find your way in. Now if this pose is not the right pose for you, you can do it upside down, or you can do it with more of the like bent out to the side kind of leg situation. We'll see how it works best for you. And again, we're going to stay a while. For me, this is this pose, and there's some other ones, the half saddle and the full saddle. There's some poses that are quite spicy. And this is one of them. So if this is a super spicy pose for you as well, you can certainly back off a bit. Oh, hold on. Lifting up a little higher gives this pose a little more of a back bend quality to it, so you get that kind of little bit of compression in the low back, a little more of a sensation of opening around the front of this hip. Going down a little lower and kind of resting closer to the ground makes it almost more of a forward bend. So you can kind of flavor it the way that you like best. We're halfway through here. Minute here, and it's possible that you have reached a point where you're like, I think I'm done. You can come out now and just spend a minute moving around Or you can hang out. For me, the way that I know if I should stay longer is it getting softer and am I getting more relaxed? And if the answer is yes, then I stay a little longer. If instead I feel a fight building up and I feel my body tensing up around the pose, then I go ahead and leave the pose. It's time to go. So if that helps you make good decisions, we're going to stay for about 30 more seconds. Take a deep breath. And then we're going to lean all the way towards this side so that we can bring that back leg all the way back around. And we'll take a moment just to stop and feel. All right, and this is how we're going to know if we've been doing the right thing here. Does my body now have a sense of ease or softness or something that feels pleasant? Or does my body feel cranky or sore or tender? And so that's, if I feel cranky, sore, tender, then I do the pose differently next time, see if it makes a difference. If I feel a little lighter, a little more at ease, a little more pleasant, then I chalk that up as a win or as a yay, that was the appropriate amount of support, and I try it again, see if it works second time. And you'll eventually just kind of build up those are the sensations that I think are pleasant and positive, and those are the sensations that I think are ones I would like to avoid, right? You'll build up your own kind of understanding of your body and how to make it work in these poses. Okay, so we're gonna do those same two poses, but on the other side. So I have set myself up for my half butterfly. This leg is now straight, this leg is now bent. So I'm going to fold over this leg. There you go, Saf. Take nice deep breaths. So we're just past the halfway mark here. minute, just noticing how things are going. I'm going to shift myself just a little bit more to one side, just so I switch up where the stress is on my hamstrings. So we're going to take 2 more breaths. Nice big inhale, come all the way up. Oh. And then I'm going to turn this into the swan. So I'm going to go this way this time and come around. Take deep breaths, yogis. We've been here for about a minute. Now you'll know if things aren't quite right. You'll know within the next couple breaths if you don't already know. So you can make those little adjustments to make your pose feel a little bit better. Or you can add a little more back bend to your pose, whatever seems like the right answer for you. exciting. So we're gonna take a nice big breath. We're gonna kind of roll towards the side. We're gonna bring this back leg all the way around. Oh. Oh, we're gonna get out of there somehow. And then take a moment. Oh, and kind of rinse everything out. Oh. Whew, that's a lot of time in the outer hips. Now, I'm going to suggest that we do a supported bridge pose as our final pose before Shavasana. So to do a supported bridge, it's helpful to have something to put under your hips. Now, I like a block okay. Sometimes the blocks feel a little too firm, and so if I cover it with a blanket or a towel, it feels a little bit softer against the bony parts of my sacrum. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to let the block hold onto our pelvis. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to take a blanket, and once I've got it in place, I'll just throw the blanket over the top of the block so that there's a little bit of a softer surface, okay? So to get into this, I'm going to start with a little blanket that's going to go underneath my shoulders and my upper back as well as my head so that I have a little bit of extra softness and support there. And then I'm going to use the block under my hips when I get there. So you could also put a pillow underneath your hips or something a little bit softer in general. All right, so I'm going to position myself so that my whole upper back and shoulders and everything are resting on this blanket, and that just gives me a little bit more of a soft place to land once the weight shifts into my shoulders, if you will. Okay, so I'm going to take my block. Now I'm going to use the 4-inch edge. Some people prefer it a little taller. I don't need that much height. I don't have a very big curve in my spine. Like I don't get into really deep back bends. So for me, generally, just the block is enough. And then if the block feels a little pokey or uncomfortable, you can take a blanket and kind of slide that in on top of it. I'm going to open it up a little bit so I can get just a little bit of blanket in here on top of this block. And again, just feel it. If it feels a little uncomfortable to you, try a slightly more padded surface and see if that does better for you. And, oh, yep, that's nicer. Okay, and then you want it underneath your pelvis, and you can leave the legs just like that, right? So we're letting the pose get supported by the block. I like to do one leg at a time, stretched out so I get a little bit more hip flexor stretch right here. And I'll give you a halfway mark, and we'll then I can do the other leg. So we're going to stay a bit. I'm going to take another deep breath, and then I'm going to switch legs because that's our halfway mark. So to start with, I'll just bring the leg in. Give myself a moment to sort of settle into place, and then slide my right leg out. And again, this side is a little tighter for me, so I'm going to go a little slower. I don't even need it to go all the way out to straight yet. Just as that sort of opens and softens, I might wind up with my foot a little farther out. getting a little softer, so I think this last minute I'll be able to kind of let it get a little bit more stretched out there. And then just let yourself breathe, yogis. Last minute here. Girls. So we're going to take 2 more breaths. I'm going to bring my leg in, and then I'm going to get myself up off this block. And pull it out from underneath me. Oh, and then once I'm down, I love to give myself a little massage right where that block was. Oh, it feels so good. And then we're going to take ourselves into a Shavasana. So that is our last pose here. I'm going to roll this blanket up that I was using, and I'm going to put that underneath my legs. I'm going to take this blanket that I've got underneath my upper back and put it just underneath my head, so that I've got a little bit more of a soft little support right there. And then I'm going to let myself totally relax for a few minutes, as best I can, given my furry coworkers and their needs. I might get interrupted just a little bit. now, yogis. Just take a moment to become aware of your body again. Without moving, just notice your breath. Take a breath so deep you can feel it, maybe to your toes. Let it go with a big sigh. Give your fingers and toes a little wiggle. Spread them apart, do little wrist and ankle circles. Spread the fingers and toes apart again, and then we're going to give ourselves whatever big stretchy shapes feel good. Maybe bring your knees in, give yourself a little hug, and one more little back massage. And then you can roll yourself to a seated position. And we'll say goodbye to each other with a nice big breath together. So nice big inhale, big deep sigh, let it all go. And then a great rest of your day. Namaste. Thanks for sharing your practice with me.